Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, April 9th, and one of the things that I have been missing a lot is our read aloud time. I hate starting a book and then never getting to finish it. And we had started reading The City of Ember when we were in school, and every day after lunch we would come in and sit down for a few minutes and draw and relax and listen to our read aloud. And I thought it would be fun to just add some time of reading in with you being at home. This is completely optional. You could sit there and draw like we do in class and just listen. But I just wanted to continue where we were for anybody who wanted to continue the story and find out what was happening. So if you remember, or even if you don't, since it's been a long time, Lena and Dune had been going through the message that they had and the pieces. And remember, when they look at it, the message you can see on the side there, it's got lots of pieces missing, right? So they were trying to figure out what the words were that were missing, and they determined that whatever they needed had to be down in the pipeworks, right? And so they were going to go check that out. The next day was supposed to be the day of singing, and so everybody else would be up on top, and they would be celebrating, and they thought they could sneak into the pipeworks, right? So we are now on chapter 14, and chapter 14 is called The Way Out, which is a good sign. But if you look, there's quite a bit left in our story. So do you think they're really going to find the way out right now? Okay, let's find out. So you can just read, listen, or wait, unless you have the book, it's hard to read, but you can just listen, you can draw during this, whatever you'd like, right? Here we go. The next day was song rehearsal day. Everyone was let off from work at 12 o'clock to practice for the singing. It was a slow morning for messages. Lena had a lot of time to sit at her station at Garn Square and think. She put her elbows on her knees and rested her chin in her hands and stared down at the pavement in front of the bench, which was worn smooth by the many feet that had passed there. She thought about the mayor down in his room full of plunder, gorging on peaches and asparagus and wrapping his huge body in elegant new clothes. She thought of his great stack of light bulbs and shook her head in bewilderment. What was he thinking? So she's kind of confused about this, right? Like, why would somebody do that? Why would he take all of the supplies of Ember and set them aside just for himself and not share? Okay. If he still had light bulbs when everyone else in Ember had run out, would he enjoy sitting in his lit room while the rest of the city drowned in darkness? And when the power finally ran out for good, all his light bulbs would be useless. Possessions couldn't save him. How could he have forgotten that? He must be thinking the same way as Looper. Everything was hopeless anyhow, so he'd live it up while he could. She leaned back against the bench, stretched her legs out, and took a long breath. Very soon the guards would storm into the secret room and seize the mayor as he sat stuffing himself on stolen goodies. Maybe they already had. Maybe today the stunning news would come. Mayor arrested, stealing from citizens. Maybe they'd announce it at the singing so everyone could hear it. No one came with any messages to be delivered, so after a while Lena left her station and found a step to sit on in an alley off Calloo Street. She pulled back her hair and braided it to keep it from sliding around. Then she took from her pocket the copy of the instructions she had made just after she sent her note to the mayor. She unfolded it and began to study it. This is what she was doing when a little before 12 o'clock she looked up to see Dune running toward her. He must have come straight from the pipeworks. He had a big, damp patch of water on one leg of his pants. He spoke in an excited rush. "I've been looking all over for you," he said. "I've found it." Found what? What do you think he found? This is kind of a review of where we left off. The E. At least, it looks like an E. It must be an E, though you wouldn't know it if you weren't looking for it. You mean the rock marked with an E in the pipeworks? Yes, I found it. He stood breathing hard, his eyes blazing. I'd seen it before, but I didn't think of it as an E then, just a squiggle that looked like writing. There are all these rocks that look like they're covered with writing. Which rocks? Where is it? Lena was on her feet now, bouncing with excitement. Down at the west end of the river, near where it goes into that great hole in the pipeworks wall. He paused, trying to catch his breath. "And listen," he said, "we could go there right now." "Right now?" "Yes, because of rehearsals. Everyone's going home, so the pipeworks will be closed and empty." "But if it's closed, how will we get in?" Grinning, Dune produced a large key from his pocket. "I ducked into the office on my way out and borrowed the spare key," he said. "Lister, he's the pipeworks director, was in the bathroom practicing his singing. He won't miss the key today, and tomorrow everyone will be off work." He did an impatient shuffle. "So, come on," he said. The town clock struck the first of its 12 noontime booms. Lena stuffed her copy of the instructions back in her pocket. "Let's go." So now we have a change of scene, and now they're going to be down in the pipeworks. Do you think they're going to find the exit? Let's find out. The pipeworks was empty and silent. Lena and Dune went up the hallway past the rows of boots and the slickers hanging on their hooks. Remember, slickers are like rain jackets? They didn't take any of these for themselves. This was not a pipeworks tunnel they were about to enter. They were sure it wouldn't be dripping with water or lined with spurting pipes. They went down the long stairway and out into the main tunnel, where the river thundered alongside the path, its dark surface strewn with flecks of light, like little tiny bits of light, right? Dune led the way along the river's edge. As they neared the west end, Lena saw the rocky outcroppings Dune had described. They were strange, bulging shapes, creased with lines like the faces of the very old. Not far beyond, Lena could see the place where the river disappeared into a great hole in the pipeworks wall. Dune knelt down beside a clump of stones. He ran a finger over their convoluted surface. Remember, they're kind of bumpy. They're not totally smooth. They have those lines in them, right? So he's running his hands over the rocks. "Look here," he said. Lena stooped down and peered into the deeply carved lines. It was hard to see the E at first, because it was surrounded by such a tangle of other lines, and because she was expecting it to be an E drawn with straight strokes. But once she saw it, an E drawn with curving lines, a script E, kind of like cursive, she was sure it had been carved on purpose. It was centered on its stone, and its lines were deep and even. "So from here we should look down at the river," said Dune. "That's what the instructions said. Down riverbank to ledge." He lay on his stomach next to the rock and inched forward until his head hung out over the edge of the path. Lena watched him anxiously. His elbows stuck up on either side of him, and his head, bent down, was nearly invisible. He stayed that way for long seconds. Then he shouted, "Yes, I see something!" and scrambled to his feet again. "You do it," he said. "Look at the riverbank right below us." Lena did as he had. She lay down and pulled herself forward until her head was over the edge. 8 feet or so below her, she saw the black water churning. Ooh, kind of scary, don't you think? She tucked her chin in and looked at the riverbank. It was a sheer rock wall, straight up and down and slick with spray, and at first that was all she saw. But she kept looking, and before long could make out short iron bars bolted into the bank, one below the next, almost directly below her. Okay, my phone is going crazy. Hold on. Let's fix that so we don't hear that. Okay. They were like the rungs of a ladder. They were a ladder, she realized. The bars provided a way to climb down to the riverbank. Not a very appealing way. The bars looked slippery, and the water below was so terribly fast. And because of the dimness and the flying spray, she couldn't actually see if there was a ledge at the bottom or not. But the E was clearly an E, and the bars were clearly a ladder. This must be the right place. "Who'll go first?" said Dune. "You can," Lena said, getting to her feet and stepping away. "All right." Dune turned so that his back was to the river, and he eased himself carefully over the rocks, feeling for the first rung with his foot. Lena watched as he sank out of sight, little by little. After a few moments his voice called up from below, "I'm down, now you come." Lena inched backward, just as Dune had, letting one foot dangle over the edge, lower and lower, until it touched the first rung of the ladder. She shifted her weight to that foot, clinging with her cold fingers to a ridge in the rock, and lowered herself slowly until she was standing on the rung with both feet. Her heart was beating so hard she was afraid it would shake her fingers loose from their grip. Now she had to move downward. She felt for the next rung with her foot, found it, let herself down. It would have been easy if it hadn't been for the river waiting below to swallow her. You're almost here," called Dune. His voice came from right below her. "There's a ledge. One more rung and you'll feel it." She did feel it, solid beneath her foot. For a second she stood there, still clutching the ladder. The surging water was only inches below her now. "Don't think about it," she told herself. She moved sideways 2 steps to stand next to Dune, and there in front of them was a rectangular space carved out of the river wall, rather like the entry hall of a building. It was perhaps 8 feet wide and 8 feet high, and would have been invisible from anywhere else in the pipeworks. You had to have climbed down the river bank to see it. They stepped into this entry hall and walked a few steps. Enough light to see by came from the tunnel behind them. Lena stopped. "There's a door," she said. "What?" said Dune. The water roared so loudly they had to shout to be heard. "The door!" Lena yelled happily. "Yes," Dune yelled back. "I see it." At the end of the passage was a wide, solid-looking door. It was dull gray, mottled with greenish and brownish blotches that looked like mildew. Lena put her palms against it. It was metal and it felt cold. The door had a metal handle, and just below the handle was a keyhole. Lena reached into the pocket of her pants for her copy of the instructions. She unfolded it, and Dune looked over her shoulder. Together, they squinted at the paper in the dim light from the main tunnel. "This is the part right here," she said, pointing. And so then she's got, of course, all of the instructions, right? Lena ran her finger along line number 3. "This must say, something downriver bank to ledge approximately 8 feet below. That's what we've just done. Then 4 is something about backs to the water, find door, something. And then key behind. That must be key behind. And then there's the small steel pan. Do you see a small steel pan?" Dune was still studying the paper. "It says right. We should look to the right of the door." And quite easily they found it. It wasn't a pan at all, but a small square of steel embedded in the wall. "A steel panel," said Lena. She ran her fingers across it and felt a dent at one side. When she pressed there, the panel sprang open easily and silently, as if it were glad to have been finally found. Inside, a silver key was hanging on a hook. And that is where we're going to stop today. So tomorrow I will keep reading our read aloud, and we'll still have our math lessons, and I hope you're getting a lot done and you're going